Hello, bonjour, hola, guten tag, it is I, the MJ Rowe Show, and here reacting to the nominees for the Mercury Prize 2019. A whole fortnight after they've been announced, but so what? I've been busy. And as you can tell, because if you hear any noise in the background, that's pretty much the workmen outside. So, for those of you who don't know, the Mercury Prize is a UK award for Best British or Irish Album of the Year. And it's one that tends to split opinion, some saying it's like the Turner Prize for music, others saying it's more so just ultra highly commercialised, pandering to the mainstream and that sort of thing. But I personally absolutely love it, because for me it seems to have the reputation of being the award for Best Alternative Album of the Year. The albums that are outside the mainstream chart, and more so the albums that are getting huge critical acclaim or representing something that they're doing something different or influential for the time. Like, for instance, past winners have included Primal Scream, Suede, Portishead, Dizzy Rascal, The XX, James Blake, Sampha, Skepta. Hammer time. And basically, it's just an award that can create tons of debate and talk about music because of just how random and wild the nomination process. It's like ultra hard to predict who will be nominated or even who will win, because nominees can include the biggest pop stars in the world, as Ed Sheeran was nominated at some point, or complete alternative unknowns from independent labels, such as my favourite album of this decade so far, Architect by C. Duncan, which was nominated in 2015 alongside Florence and the Machine and Jamie XX and Aphex Twin, who were then beaten by a complete unknown at the time with Benjamin Clementine. But last year's nominations really riled a lot of people up, because the Mercury Prize then failed at its purpose because it didn't nominate the major alternative or acclaimed British albums of that year. I mean, there was no Young Fathers, no Sophie, no Shame, no Let's Eat Grandma, no John Hopkins. And in its place was a shortlist that felt the albums picked were really random and almost just put in there so they could put major artists in. Like, it included really bad and lackluster albums from Lily Allen and Everything Is Recorded in the place of those albums. Though there were some pleasant surprises, such as A Fever Dream by Everything, which is my favourite album of theirs so far. Very strong conceptually, love the synthesizer sound, and the in-depth production is fantastic on the middle track, such as the title track. But this year they're clearly trying to undo that, because the first thing you think when you see this shortlist that makes it a win is that pretty much all the major UK albums of the year so far have been nominated for it. And these are albums that are especially good at representing UK music at the time, because what makes 2019 different from most of the other years in this decade is that this year has got the most clear rising music scenes and trends going on at the moment. And these are all represented in this year's prize. First of which being the one which many people will think represents the latter half of this decade, and that is the big time of UK hip hop and grime. The megastars of this genre have reappeared in the past year. Skepta's had a strong album with some hit singles, and Stormzy's had a ton of hit singles, and even though I'm still not a fan of his music, put on an absolutely incredible Glastonbury performance. A strong sense of authorship, the sets are incredible, the outfits are incredible, especially the vest designed by Banksy. Tons of guest appearances. It was like a stage show, constantly something new appearing and surprising, and they turn out just being a nice tribute to UK hip hop as a whole. But the representation of UK hip hop on this year's Mercury Prize are pretty much the three main ones of the year so far. Firstly, Psychodrama by Dave, which is very representative of how UK hip hop has evolved in this decade, largely because it focuses on the idea of UK hip hop becoming more album based, like Stormzy's album in 2017, where with all its interludes and multi-part tracks, it basically did feel like it needed to be an actual album, an actual solid artwork to push forward. And that is what Dave has done with this current album, where it is pretty much all framed as a therapy session in which he talks about the harshness of urban life in Britain at the moment. And as you can tell, he is very much the conscious rapper at the moment. Though for me personally, I'm not a big fan, and the reason for that is the production on this album. Grime has a very signature sound, the electronic thudding beats, but most grime artists seem to have just stuck to that, and for me personally, that is starting to get overly repetitive and starting to dog the genre down, especially with some acts like Gigs, and instead of just repeating that same old sound over and over again. That is what makes people who aren't into grime say, oh, it all sounds the same, because a lot of artists are using those same sounds. In fact, that might explain why grime took a big dip in 2018. So, next we have the album that I think, another nominated album, the album I really hope wins, because in my opinion it's easily the best UK hip-hop album of this generation, and for me really represents where it should go forward, and that is Grey Area by Little Simz. I'm sure you've heard tons of it from tons of critics this year, least of all The Needle Drop. I think it's a fantastically solidly made album right throughout, and it very much represents that conscious side which I love in rap, because it makes it very much a personal art piece. Little Simz is very confessional about her own mentality, her own life. Not all in dark ways. There are some great ones where she reflects on her childhood, but as a whole, love that side. But what really pushes it forward is the production on it. It's like constantly varied right throughout. One moment you've got, the hard fuddering beats, but next you've got some spidery violins, you've got creepy violins, you've got some cartoon and karate film sound effects, you've got some 2003 style grime on one track that is a tribute to early grime artists. And then you've just got some great reggae beats courtesy of Chronix, and just some great echoing soulful vocals and funkiness courtesy of Michael Kiwanuka. And I think it is these albums that go the extra step with the production that truly stand out in UK hip-hop, as has been the past case with Kano, with all the trumpets and brass on Made in the Manor, and as with Loyal Kana, with the more guitar-sampled soul-based sound. And then we have Slow Tie, who's been the big surprise hit of the year, and is already making waves in the US with his collaborations with, or guest appearances more so, with Tyler, the Creator, and represents very much the more punkish side of UK hip-hop, which brings me on to the next major UK scene at the moment, the punk revival, which on the list is represented by Idols, Fontaine's DC, and the one who I love out of this genre, who I also think stands a good chance at winning, Black Midi with their album Schlangenheim, who remind me a ton of Public Image, because they take, first of all, the musicianship is excellent, great guitar playing, great drums. It very much captures the essence of punk, because for me, the lead singer's voice sounds almost identical to Johnny Rotten, and I love it. The sort of aggressive, high-pitched, weaselly snarl. You know what I mean? And of course, just how it's taking apart the genre, how experimental and wild it is with its sound. So that's So not overly massive on the others personally, but for me that is a fantastic album. And then we have the other major surprise scene at the moment, jazz. And you like jazz? And the Mercury Prize pretty much has a long history of jazz. There's been the running joke of the token jazz act nominated. But now we're at the point where, following on from the success of Kamasi Washington and now the Sons of Kemet, there's been a hugely growing jazz scene in the UK and London at the moment, and that's burst through from fantastic albums from The Comet is Coming, one of my top albums of this year, Ezra Collective, Kokoroko, and who have the Mercury Prize nominated? Seed Ensemble. Who the bloody hell are they? I mean, I'm not bitter because my favourites haven't been not nominated. It's that we're finally at the point where jazz is making its way back into the alternative mainstream. It's getting huge acclaim and tons of notice. There was particularly tons of performance by these new jazz acts at Glastonbury this year. And it just seems unfair that the artists that have actually got the acclaim and have actually brought the genre to the forefront, I mean, the acclaim for The Comet is Coming, the huge acclaim for the Ezra Collective, and Kokoroko seems one that could get commercial success with one of their tracks, Abusey Junction, getting 30 million views on YouTube. Like, wow. But then they've nominated a complete unknown. They've not acknowledged the artists that have actually made jazz big at the moment. And it feels unfair that we're actually at the point where a jazz album could win, yet they've nominated an artist that stands no chance and just continues that whole token jazz act thing. I mean, it's as if during the days of Britpop, they nominated the Blue Tones, but then paid no mind to Suede, Oasis or Blur. Do you know what I mean, like? By the way, in case you're wondering how to do Mancunian accent, you just do Liverpudlian with a nasally cold. So yeah, I think that is a big flaw on this year's list. But as a whole, they've done a great job with it. They've tried their hardest to represent UK music at the moment, and they've done a great job with it. They've got all the majorly acclaimed albums outside of the signature scenes that will represent this year, punk, hip-hop and jazz. We've also just got the major critical frontrunners, such as the fantastic album from the 1975, and just majorly acclaimed works by artists like Kate LeBon, and one I love by Foals, of course. Not a massive Foals fan, but this is like a solidly good album by them. Has a very similar vibe to Everything Everything with the more electronic basis and politically based lyrics. And by UK R&B artist Naya, who I really like, very much captures that really chill synthy side of UK R&B, which is designed to represent it at the moment, as was shown by Georgia Smith last year. There are some albums that I do think are severely missing from this year's nominees, and one artist that I think really shouldn't be on the playlist at all is Anna Calvi. I mean, she's been nominated tons of times before, and for me personally, her music is just really forgettable. She doesn't really stand out as particularly unique, of course. We've got tons of stuff by PJ Harvey, Florence and the Machine, and Back for Lashes, which is pretty much the same. And I feel the only reason this album got nominated was because of the political side of it, talking about masculinity and feminism and so on. But as a whole, I just think it's a very forgettable album. If they wanted something that was a bit more gothic and rocky based, they should have definitely gone for These New Puritans, with a fantastically unique album this year, Inside the Rose. They're a band that has long been highly acclaimed and then just long overlooked by the prize. And the big thing that stands out about them is their stuff is just so incredibly in-depthly produced. There's a ton of perfectionism with it, on top of all the layers of gurgling synth and post-dubstep bassy sounds. You then have grand orchestras, opera singers going on, some tribal drums in the background, and they just perfectly create a gothic tone. Like, they perfectly capture all the best bits of the 80s gothic indie acts, so stuff like The Cure and Depeche Mode. You can strongly hear the 80s of this one. And it just sort of creates its own world. It's like being transported to a modern day The Wicker Man. You know, one without Nicolas Cage. But yeah, so sad that one's been overlooked this year, as they're a band that finally need it. If they wanted a legend shot, they could have done Paul Weller, who's going strongly at the moment. And I feel the album When I Wake Up by Maverick, Sabre has been hugely overlooked. I think that is also an album that paints a fantastic picture of the struggles in urban Britain at the moment, in a way that's really chill and soulful, yet can also be hard-hitting and gritty, and frequently creatively skips between genres, going from trip-hop to reggae to neo-soul to gospel to even bits of Irish folk at the end. So definitely hear that one if you haven't already. And yeah, as a whole, it's a pretty great shortlist this year. There's a few of my favourites that are missing out, which I'm a bit sad on, but as a whole, got some fantastic albums this year. And as a whole, it just does as the Mercury Prize should do, represent the best in alternative music and supporting those artists, and has just done a great job of capturing where exactly UK music is at the moment. As for who I'll be placing my bet on winning, I'm definitely saying it's going to be between Little Sims and Black Midi, because they're not the obvious choices. They've had megatons of acclaim. They represent a trend in UK music at the moment, but they still have huge commercial potential. Tons of attention has come Little Sim's way. She's even supporting promotions with Noisy, I think it is. And also Black Midi have just got it's massively spread throughout the music press through word of mouth, particularly after their KEXP performance. So Black Midi, Little Sims, those are who my bet's on, though it's always impossible to predict. I've got it wrong the past few years. I guess Michael Kiwanuka when it was Skepta. And then I guessed Kate Tempest when it was Sampha. I absolutely love both those albums. And so, that's my opinion on that. Please tell me in the comments what you think of the shortlist, who maybe you think should have been nominated, and who you're placing your bet on winning. I'm out of ideas. Goodbye. Have a nice day. Bloody hell, this is trippy. It's like a 90s music video. How the hell have I got it this long?